Okay, so you're back at the webinar series on estimating greenhouse gas reductions of AB32 greenhouse gas reduction fund projects. And you probably already know that I'm Richard Harris. You probably already know that this program is sponsored by NorCal SAF, UC Cooperative Extension, and CAL FIRE, and that it's funded by a grant from state and private forestry. So the project types that we've covered in this series have been reforestation, fuels reduction, forest legacy, and then projects in oak woodlands. For those of you that weren't at both sessions, the recordings are available at that URL that you see in front of you there. And I think you've already been, I think Mike Gilliso has already circulated that URL to all the registrants so they know where they can go to hear and see the past recordings. I wanted to mention to you, to those of you that are requesting continuing education credits, I've compiled that list for the attendees at the April 3rd and 10th sessions, and I have forwarded that on to the National Office of SAF, and I have your certificates, and so I'll be forwarding those on to you pretty quickly here. Today's session, we're going to have questions and answers on the previous sessions with Tadashi, Chuck, Helgi, and myself, and Tom Scott. I wanted to announce 2 future sessions that we're going to have. On the 24th, we're going to look at the potential greenhouse gas benefits of biomass utilization with Tad Mason of TSS and Bruce Springsteen of the Placer County Air Pollution Control District. I was just made aware of the fact that the air pollution control districts have several of the districts have initiatives for the utilization of biomass and biochar to offset fossil fuel sources of energy, and also to try to counteract the effects of wildfire emissions. In early May, and actually the date has been set now, it's going to be May 7th, which is not a Friday, it's a Thursday, because we had to accommodate some folks. I'm going to present an overview of the carbon in California forests based on my work with the FIA analysis data. And we're also going to have a presentation on the ARB compliance offset program and some of the constraints and opportunities associated with engaging in the carbon market in California. And that's going to be presented by American Carbon Registry. So you'll be informed about these things, and just keep tuned. And we'll probably have some future sessions as well. Now, this is really an unfolding subject and quite interesting. Today's ground rules, type your question into the chat box on the bottom left of your screen. Then try to indicate what topic it relates to if you can. And Mike Gilliso is going to cut those questions out, put them into our questions pod, bring them into the center of the screen so that everybody can see them. I'll repeat those questions and forward them on to whoever is the appropriate responder. So Helgi is here for general program questions, general AB32 program questions. Tadashi is here for fuels treatments, Tom for oak woodland, I'm here for reforestation, and Chuck's here for conservation easements. That's it. Now we're going to get underway, and we already have a question. Harold is asking about converting 300 square feet of basal area per acre of Doug fir to tons of carbon dioxide. And we could, first, I think Harold was not at Chuck's presentation last week, and this subject was covered in great detail in that presentation. So I think if you go back and you take a look at that presentation, you'll have at least you'll have the beginnings of an answer to your question. What you cannot overlook here is that you need a tree list. Just knowing how many basal if you just have how many square feet of basal area you have per acre won't get you to carbon. You need to have a tree list and then convert the trees to biomass and then convert the biomass to carbon. Okay, so there's another question over here.
Richard, may I jump in there?
Oh, yeah. Sure.
No, just to confirm, what I presented last week was kind of a spectrum of less intensive calculations to the most intensive. And on the kind of the left end of the spectrum, you actually didn't need a tree list. It was actually taking board feet or 1,000 cubic feet and converting to carbon. So yeah, I guess the suggestion would be to review that, and it's laid out actually both in less intensive and more intensive methods, and the more intensive being the tree list calculations.
Oh, good. Thanks for the clarification. There's another question in the box there. Mike, do you want to catch it? The box is so small that it's kind of frustrating. Okay. Modeling question. Can you enlarge the box a little bit, Mike, so that I can see the whole question? Or do I have to do that? There we go. I guess I have to do it. Okay, Matt's asking where most of the projects for fuel reduction are going to involve pruning, thinning, and removing brush. Why are we being asked to project out 100 years when the brush and limbs are going to grow back in the next 10 years? Remember that a lot of these projects are going to be brush and understory removal and not associated with logging. I have to beg ignorance here in the sense that I can't remember exactly what the time frame is for fuels treatments in terms of the analysis period. Tadashi, do you recall that?
Yeah, actually, so I was just wondering the same thing myself. I think during my presentation I talked about modeling out 40 years, but to be honest, I'd have to look at the either the guidance document or the RFP for the fuels treatments section to see to be for sure that it was 100 years. So I think the idea, I think with the pruning and if you were doing basically removing brush or doing pruning as a way of reducing ladder fuels up into the canopy, your primary effect is going to be reducing fire severity and potential fire size. So, but it comes back again to the question of when do you model fire actually happening? And I think for the purposes, and maybe Helga can speak to this a little bit as well, but I think for the purposes of this type of analysis, we want to show that the potential effect that it's going to have. And in the guidance document, it talks about, I think it talks about showing, running a fire through your landscape, or simulating a fire in some fashion or another at some point post-treatment. I think it said 10 years. So in some ways, I think it would be important for if the life of your project, if the expected efficacy of your treatment is only 10 years, then it wouldn't make much sense for you to burn it at 10 years. But if you can show that there's a benefit at, say, 5 years or 3 years post-treatment or 1 year, post-treatment, then, I think that would be one way to approach it. You have to remember that the methods for sort of evaluating the greenhouse gas benefits of fuel treatments are not as established as something like, let's say, reforestation or improved forest management, where the methodologies are pretty well established at this point already with the carbon within the carbon markets and stuff. So again, what I guess my suggestion would be, and this is maybe getting away from the question can address the issue of 100 years and say this project is not designed to go out 100 years unless it's, maintained at some interval. You address it in that way, but also show that, if a fire occurs within, let's say, 5 years of, post-treatment, this is the, estimated effect that it would have, if that makes sense.
Richard, maybe I could add a couple of things to Tadashi's. I agree with everything he said. There's a couple of things. First of all, the guidance documents that we put out it's really not a requirement. It's suggestions for methods, and not every fuel reduction method will be just pruning and a short project life, and we're kind of getting at the idea there of the long-term steady state behavior of the forest as you model it out, and it's really beneficial to see how your growth and yield progresses over time. If you have that 100-year time horizon, you can get a pretty good idea of assumptions and methods that's gone into the modeling. That'd be one thing. And also from the point of view of being able to backtrack and calculate kind of an average baseline over the 100 years, it just gives you more information. But certainly I think Matt answered his own question with his follow-up there with 40 years for crediting period and a project life of 100 years. So if you have a shorter project like Tadashi alluded to, just state that.
Okay, so Matt, you just addressed that question of Matt's about the crediting period versus the project life. Do we have some other questions? Because we're all sitting here waiting with bated breath. So Chuck, just to clarify, I guess I sort of blitzed out on your presentation. If you have volume in board feet per acre, you can convert that to biomass, and you don't need to have a tree list.
Yeah, the reality is that you may need a tree list to get the board feet, or volume. But to directly go, there's two methods. On that left end, you just need board feet or volume, and you can go to carbon. So how do you derive that board feet? You have to justify, and likely will come from a tree list. So kind of a loaded question or a response, but you just got to be able to defend how you got to your board feet, and once you get there, or your volume, you can get to carbon.
Thanks. Any other questions? Come on, folks. Oh, John. You want to cut that in there, Mike, about John's question about coal? If
Yeah, but before we do that, Matt Green has offered another comment that I've copied in there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I saw that. This is Tadashi, and that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Richard.
So go on. Go on, Tashi. Go ahead and respond.
Okay, so Matt's asking. He says in many instances we're going to see, we're not going to see any change in growth rates or sequestration from pruning and thinning and understory vegetation, and how are we going to be able to model change? And I think what I was alluding to before was the idea that what was just that is, you're not necessarily changing in the overall, scale of things. You're not necessarily changing the biomass within your stand per se, but I think the idea is that where your benefit is coming from is that you're reducing the potential for high severity fire, or reducing the size of your fire altogether. So the way that you would go about, there's like ways of estimating. There's different ways of estimating that, and I think that the way that we do it most often is to use this sort of a publicly available model called FlamMap, or Farsight is another one related to each other. and you can sort of put fire on the ground with and without your treatment, and simulate fire on the ground with and without treatment, and see what it does in terms of change that change. And the way that I presented it last week was that you can take your expected emissions per acre emissions. Let's say, for example, if you had a fire, if your fuel treatment was expected to reduce your fire size at whatever point in time that you're evaluating it, let's say 5 years or 10 years, if it's expected to reduce your fire size by 50%, then you can take your expected per acre emissions at that point in time, and reduce them by that coefficient 50%. So again, I think the idea there is you're looking at the change in fire, expected emissions from fire, rather than the change in the carbon stocks growing over the course of time.
Okay. There's a question from John about not finding California mixed conifer in coal, and it's there. I can tell you that. There's two different. I was just trying to bring up coal on this computer I have, but I don't have the plug-in. So I can just tell you this, that there are two options. One is forest type, and there's another one below that. You use the one on the top and just scroll down through forest type, and you'll get to California mixed conifer. It's there for sure. So, John, if you want to give me a call, I can walk you through it with you online. I can walk you through it, and we can both be online at the same time with coal, and I can show you how it works. Just if you want to give me a call, 707-685-5508 after 1 today. Okay, any more questions here? Looks like Matt and John are the ones who come loaded with the most questions here. Oh, missed the home phone number. 707-685-5508.
In regards to John's question, this is Helgi. I suppose an issue may be if you're not in the right area, it doesn't give you the right species drop-down list you're looking for. So you got to make sure that you have the right area of California selected in coal.
Now, you got to use the latitude and longitude of your study area. I mean, that should be the centroid of your plot. So I'll work it through with you, John, if you want to give me a call. I'll show you how it works. Okay. Oh, look, there's another question there. Did you get that, Mike? Cal Fire and Bill. Are any of these models capable of modeling effects on non-logging related tools? Most of these jobs are going to be completed by hand saws, chainsaws, and lopped or put into chippers or burnt in small piles. All of the existing models I've seen so far are only able to model skidder, cats, and loaders. I think you're talking about emissions. Is that what you're talking about, modeling emissions? That's what it sounds like you're talking about, Matt. You are talking about emissions. Yeah, the Bill's spreadsheet, the Cal Fire THP spreadsheet, and the guidance document only give you sort of general emissions based on certain kinds of equipment, average kind of emissions from equipment. For my take on this, if you look at the emissions factors that are given under reforestation in the guidance document, there's 3 different levels for site prep, high, medium, low. If you're talking about exclusively doing hand work, I think with defensible reason, you could use the low emission standards and you'd be fine. Okay, if, on the other hand, in my case, where I know I'm going to be using masticators and skidders and all sorts of stuff out there, I'm going to use the high emission standards. In the general scheme of things, the emissions from equipment, or from handwork, generally aren't going to make or break you. So I think, if you just look at those emission standards in the guidance document that are high, low, medium for site prep, those are, included in the ARB protocol, and I think you'll be fine if you use the low. Or if you want to be conservative, use the medium.
Richard, just for clarifying, this is Chuck here. Are you talking about emissions from actual machinery or emissions from disturbance of soil and litter?
Emissions from machinery. Okay, hand saws, chainsaws, and so on. Not emissions from, say, pile burning. He's talking about it.
One clarifying thing would be for the California Forest Legacy. If you're following the IFM protocol or avoid conversion, there's really not accounted for. I think it's considered, I might be going off track here, but capped under, already capped and not, you don't have to consider emissions from machinery, at least for IFM stuff. So I don't know about your reforestation, Richard, but at least in reference to IFM and avoid conversion.
Yeah, I think you do have to consider it. Well, you would need to consider it for reforestation. At least I did. The guide tells you have to, and I think you should consider it for fuels treatments and for pest control projects as well. Just to be safe, because there's going to be other people scrutinizing this work, and it's better to be conservative. Okay. There's another one in here. Mike, you want to catch that one? That was a good question. This one's for Helgi. Did you catch it, Mike, or should I just read it off the chat box? Oh, here's some more questions too that we're missing. Okay. Does coal have data sets for native Monterey pine? If not, is there a substitute species data set you can recommend? There's a good question. I don't have the coal list in front of me in terms of the forest types. I really can't tell you whether that covers, whether there's any plots out there that have Monterey pine in them. I suspect that there's not too many, if there are any. So that's a good question, but I don't really have an answer for it. Anybody want to chime in on that? The substitute species? I guess we're talking about pest control or fuels treatments, in Monterey Peninsula or Cambria or someplace like that. Dead silence.
Well, Monterey pine is kind of similar to young growth giant sequoia in the sense that there isn't a lot of data sets for it, and that gives you opportunity as well as challenges in that your best estimate of a false substitute is probably not going to be challenged by any regulatory entity. So I would pick the one that I felt, the pine species probably that I felt was closest.
Well, it's a short-lived pioneer pine. So, I mean, if that gives you a little bit of help, I mean, maybe you could look at slash pine or something, in Georgia. I mean, I don't know. That's a really interesting question, whether there's a substitute species that would give you, at least put you in the ballpark. Maybe we'll get back to you on that, Dan. Maybe we'll get you, we'll talk to some other people about that and get back to you on that, okay? Try to send me an email to remind me. I think you have my email address, and so just send me an email to remind me. There was another question here. Carlin talking to Matt, that's fine. John is asking about the ARB signing off on the models or the calculators that we might use, that they're not the same that are in the guidance. So how would our ARB react to those other approaches? Helgi?
Sure. Well, I think I mentioned in my talk that we are working with ARB to come up with these. We worked with ARB to come up with this guidance document, and to some extent it's left open, and that was on CAL FIRE's insistence, because I think Tadashi pointed out that for some of these projects there isn't really a industry standard methodology, and so we wanted to give applicants the opportunity to use whatever method they felt was appropriate for their project. And the question of how ARB is going to react to other approaches, well, I can't answer for ARB, but CAL FIRE will certainly be reviewing the applications, and I think if you have a compelling case for a greenhouse gas reduction, that will stand on its own. So I'd just like to reiterate that there is a fair amount of flexibility in biomass equations and methodology. So the main thing to focus on is demonstrating a greenhouse gas reduction from your project.
Dan had a comment that someone had suggested to him that to model the Monterey pine and Cambria might use ponderosa pine on site 4. It's a pine. I don't know. It's kind of it's a really interesting question. I would like to explore it with a couple other people that are more familiar with Monterey pine. I mean, even Bill Libby is still around, so he might be a good person to ask that question. Matt's asking about I think he means the FIA data won't be available for some time, and many lenders don't have site-specific data. You can get access to the FIA data. Matt, if you send me an email, I can send you the link, and it gets you to the plots, to the plot data. The other thing, I'm assuming you've got a fuels treatment project that you're thinking about, and you're going to be taking out submerchantable material, and you're kind of wondering how to get a before treatment stand description in lieu of having site-specific data. The FIA data is potentially available to you, so I can send you that link. But another way to approach that is really to see if you have any neighbors who do have site-specific data for similar situations. I know, for example, in the sort of checkerboard patterns, where are you? I don't know exactly where you are, but I know in some of the checkerboard patterns in Amador, Calaveras counties, you have neighbors who might have pretty good inventory data for similar types of stands. And, you might want to try to explore that. I have found some of those industrial forestry operations to be quite cooperative in cases like that, especially if they're going to benefit from a fuels treatment. Okay, let's go on from here. Why am I doing all the talking? Who's the ARB forester, Helgi?
Richard, I could add on the FIA data that I don't think you need to have the latest and greatest, Matt, in that the FIA data are remeasured continuously or at least periodic intervals. So I don't see any reason why you need the latest remeasurements. If you need to impute the data for your property from similar stands in the FIA data, all you're looking for is really a type, site, potentially age, and doesn't really matter if the data is 10 years old or 1 year old.
But we do have a complete cycle now, Helgi. So if you go to the link, the data mart on FIA now, you can find pretty good data right now.
Yeah, so that's my point exactly. There is a pretty rich data set that you can download right now. Yeah. And I think I may have mentioned too, the state forests certainly have data available, and parks has some data, and certainly neighboring landowners, like Richard alluded to.
Yeah, might be a little bit of a detective. You have to be kind of a detective on some of these things, but the key to it is that you find something that is similar to what you have, and you can defend that either with photographs or however you want to do it, just to try to make the case. If you don't have the site-specific data and you can't invest in it because you don't have the wherewithal to do that, then you have to do the best you can. The ARB Forester, I think that's they're looking for one. I don't think they have one, do they, Helgi?
No, I don't think they have an RPF on staff.
Stuart McMorrow just mentioned on the chat there that Barb Bamberger, yeah, Bamberger.
But she's not a forester, I don't think. I think she's looking for one. Okay, Matt's in Sonoma County, so okay, that's good to know. What else do we got here? Well, you correct me, Stu. Is Barbara? Is she a forester or not? No, she's in charge of the compliance program, but I don't know if she's a forester or not. What are the units you want us to report in, John? Oh, she's not a forester, right? That's what I thought too. John has got a question here. What are the units you want us to report in? The guidance jumps all over the place. The units. Well, the units that on your application, on the front page, it says, give us your greenhouse gas reduction in metric tons per acre. Is that correct, Helgi?
Correct.
Metric tons per acre of carbon or CO2? Which?
Are you asking me?
Yeah. Is it carbon or CO2? I can't remember myself.
I think it's CO2 equivalent, but certainly if you report carbon, as long as you state which one it is, we can do the translation.
Yeah, it's just multiplied by a factor. So carbon or CO2. And the guidance document, if you're looking for those conversion factors, they're really well covered in the reforestation part of the guidance document. Just in case you're looking at other pieces of it, the conversions are all done quite well in that part. Okay, what else we got here? We don't have any questions about Oaks. Tom is here. Maybe time to wrap up. It's almost lunchtime. Is everybody's stomach growling? I mean, if we want to wrap up, that's fine. If you have thoughts that come to you afterwards that you feel that, you know, as you get further into your process and you come up with questions, I'm perfectly happy to take those questions and refer them to some of the presenters if that, you know, works for them. I don't mind being a portal for that. And if there are questions that I can answer, like the question about coal, and you want to contact me, you know, I'll be happy to do that. You know, we're here as long as you need us today, but if you don't need us anymore, then we'll be around.
Richard, John asked who has been speaking.
What is that?
John asked who has been speaking. So maybe he doesn't recognize those who are on the call, or Tadashi and Charles and Chuck, or Charles.
Yes. And me, and you. Matt is asking about CFIP projects, you not being able to use funds within 100 feet of a residence. That's the regulatory space for defensible space, Helgi, right? So you can't use CFIP funds there, right?
Yeah, and quite frankly, I can't remember the answer to that one, but I'm pretty sure it's on our question and answer website. I think I remember seeing that. So if you log on, you should be able to find the answer there, and I'll follow up and get back to you, Matt.
I think we got Chris Dimney here. I see him on the list, and maybe Chris has got the answer to that since he's. Oh, and Steve Jones is here too. Probably both of those guys would know whether CFIP is, you know, applicable within defensible space. Yes, you can. Oh, you can use it. Oh, Chris says yes, you can use it. No, wait a minute. Is this still the case? No, you can't use it. So the answer is no, you can't use it within 100 feet of a residence. And I guess, you know, that's because of the defensible space regulation. Multiple attendees are typing. All right. See, now here it all comes. The floodgates open. Yes, you can use it near residences, now he says. Okay. So, good. Can't use them, and Russ says no.
Let's regroup on that and give you an official.
Yeah, you better get it. You got differences of opinion there.
We'll put it on our question and answer website.
Okay. Or Matt, if you send me an email and I get an answer from Helgi, I'll forward it on to you, okay? Tadashi, question that was posed to me last week, how do we obtain weather data for estimating or modeling fire? Do you want to talk about that, Tadashi?
Sure. I just stuck it in there so you could copy it. I'll answer my own question. So yeah, somebody from the webinar previously emailed me and was just asking, you know, I had mentioned in the presentation, you know, that you want to look at fire under, you know, you want to sort of, if you're trying to justify your fire changes in fire behavior, fire size or severity, you know, you can potentially like model it under certain conditions, right? So you would model it under an extreme, you know, a severe condition or something, you know, expected, your problem fire conditions in sort of Forest Service parlance. I typically obtain raw data from, I think it's a website, the KC-FAST website. It's basically for federal agencies, you know, firefighting agencies actually to obtain the weather data, you can go to probably the easiest one to get it from is a website called, I haven't used it in a while, but it's called Roman Real Time. I'll stick it in the chat box here, and then you guys can see it. Let me find it real quick. But basically, what you want to do is essentially go back, look at the weather data from as far back as you need to or want to. In our case, we try and go back historically as far back as we feel the data is reliable. If you're and then you can, there's different ways of sort of calculating what the percentiles are. The typical way of looking at it is to find the conditions that are at some high percentile, so beyond the 90th percentile, right? So what's the temperature and humidity and wind speed that you expect from a 90th percentile day or 95th percentile day? And then you can sort of either model your fire under those conditions and see what you expect to happen. So that would be my suggestion, either going to KCFast. It's a little tricky to navigate around that site because it's old and it's geared towards, I think, internal use or agency use, but the Roman website is much more accessible. So I'll post both of those here in a second.
Stu is got a point here he's making about the ARB. I think it's a good one that he makes. We're not questioning Barb's credentials. We're just saying she's not a forester. So you want to cut that in there, Mike, and I'll read it for everybody.
Okay.
Okay, so Barb is quite knowledgeable about the process and specifics, and the ARB has hired a forester, but the person is not an RPO, and that person starts in June, and that ARB is very busy with project review, and I know that they get, and I mean, I've talked to Stu about this actually, that they get criticized because, there's so many projects in the pipeline and they're kind of swamped. So I don't think the ARB would be the ones that we would go to for assistance from the applicants on doing these greenhouse gas calculations. I think that's probably not the way it's going to work, but the ARB may actually review some of these projects to make sure that the methods that are used are defensible. Is that right, Helgi?
Yes, we will have, our plan is to have at least 2 CAL FIRE reviewers and 1 ARB reviewer and then an external reviewer.
Okay, good. Tadashi has typed in the website for the RAWS data. I've used that data myself way back many moons ago for hydrologic modeling purposes. So it's readily accessible. The other questions coming along here? I see the Placer County RCD is represented on our list of attendees. I'm kind of surprised we're not seeing any more of the other RCDs on this, attending these sessions. I know Mark Egbert has attended a couple of them, but I'm surprised we don't see others. Oh, CMS data. Okay, Tom Scott is also saying that CMS data is also available for lower elevation areas of the state. I think, Tom, if you just, are you on the line, Tom?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, so have you used the CMIS data?
Yeah, it's actually really well organized, and you can scale up in any time unit and typically find a geographic location that may have been collecting data for anywhere from the 1980s up until 2000. So it provides evapotranspiration, a lot of data that is much more sophisticated than you can get. And since it's collected continually, windrows, precipitation, all these things you can back calculate a lot of climate conditions.
Good. So if you just Google CMIS,
Yeah,
CIMIS,
yeah, CIMIS. It's the California Irrigation Management Information System. And it's designed to help farmers know how much they have to irrigate. So it tends to be in areas where there are, in some cases, urban trees or agriculture. But you can take that data and then find out, like how much drying has occurred and how much precipitation has occurred. And in fact, those evapotranspiration curves that I had on my talk were all taken from CMIS.
great. Thank you, Tom.
Yeah.
Dan Turner's got a question here about calculations at the basis for CO impact of burning buildings. I think if you mean CO2 impact. Avoidance is a plan, not clear how to reflect the value of not burning them. That's an interesting question. Avoided emissions from burning houses.
I could take a first stab at it, and I'm sure Tadashi has some thoughts too. Clearly, we in CAL FIRE would like to minimize that as a carbon source, and I haven't run across any method specifically that I can remember. I don't think it would rise to a, hopefully not to a significant carbon source. Tadashi, do you have any insights?
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't know of anything current that, I know that years ago there were some like fire behavior fuel models being tested. Somebody made a first attempt at like urban interface fuel models, but I haven't seen anything since then. Not to say that it's not out there, but yeah, I certainly think I think in general, my opinion would be, it's something you could mention, but I think is in terms of the overall accounting, I can't say for sure, but it would be, you could. I don't think there's a way for us to account for that right now. So
There's a point that Matt is a very active participant. He's saying that Chris Simney mentioned that you can have positive income coming from these projects. However, you must subtract that income from the grant. That is the case, right, Helgi?
So you must subtract the positive income coming from the project from the grant. Yes, I believe that's the case.
Yeah, that's in the procedural guidelines. Is that, say, for example, you have some, in fact, even if you were selling biomass or selling timber, whatever it is, if there's a positive revenue stream, then that has to be accounted for. Let's see. There's some more questions here. Mike, you're going to catch them? I think we're a couple questions behind here. Maybe not. Let's see here.
Richard, they're statements,
yeah.
not questions.
Okay. Clarification on this, on the income issue. Per acre level or for the project as a whole, I presume either way. I mean, it's going to have to be accounted for however you count the beans. So if you've got, 50 tons of biomass coming off and you're selling it for $30 a ton for the project as a whole, then that's what you have to account for. Charles Chuck is saying, you could estimate the emissions from stored wood products if you know how many board feet are used to construct the house. I've heard a kind of rule of thumb of 5,000 board feet to build, a standard single family home. I don't know if that's still right. No, we used to use that way back when I was doing environmental impact reports. Kevin is stating that there would be emissions associated with rebuilding the burned houses too, which is correct. Any way you look at it, burning houses is not a good deal. Do we have any more questions? Looked like Jeff Calvert started to type something, but he stopped in the middle. Starting to lose a few participants now too, so maybe we're about to wrap up here. What do you think, Mike?
Let's see what Kevin or Jeff's got to say and go from there.
Well, he keeps starting and stopping. He started to type twice, now he's starting again.
I don't think he's actually starting and stopping. I think it's just the system doesn't pick up on it all the time.
Oh. We can wait for a few minutes here and see if he's got something he wants to share with us.
Yeah, better be good, Jeff. But yeah, it seems like we've pretty well exhausted the questions.
There could be a lot more questions that I mentioned, and I think if people come upon those, feel free to forward them to us. We might even be able to post answers if they're of general interest. You should keep in touch with the website. We'll send out another announcement to all the registrants about the upcoming sessions. But I think the next one, particularly on utilization of biomass as a greenhouse gas reduction management strategy, I think you'll find that quite interesting. I know that I found it really interesting to hear that all the air pollution control districts have initiatives, and not all of them, but a bunch of them have initiatives in this area. So I guess do we want to close the meeting, Mike?
Well, maybe Jeff did give up.
I think you did. I want to thank. Go on.
So, Tadashi, one more quick thing. Just poking around on coal around the Monterey area. I do see from that early question. I do see Monterey pine coming up in the.
Oh, great.
Plot. So as a species. So.
Okay, good.
Jeff is typing. Jeff could go down to Helge's office and jump on the phone here.
Richard, I might just mention, for those who haven't seen it already, we have extended the application deadline for GGRF grants to June 10th.
Mm-hmm. I know. I've been hearing some people are feeling a little sorry that that's happening just because they won't be able to do much this field season. I guess you probably feel the same way, huh?
There was, shall we say, significant demand for a extension, so we felt that was appropriate, and we still think most people can get some field work in this season.
That's good. Yeah, that'll be really important. Okay, let's see. There's people are still typing. Oh, Lisa says, with the later proposal due date, when do you expect contracts to be finalized?
We're still aiming for the July, August
Good.
start date.
So this means that you guys are just going to have to work a little bit harder or a
Exactly.
little bit faster, you know.
It's good to have a little bit of pressure on state governments. You know how they are.
Yep. I used to work for them. Let's see. Okay. Jeff
There we go.
finally came through. Okay. Precludes CFIP funding from being used to satisfy the requirements of the Forest Practice Act. But how you pay for fuels reduction around your house has been determined by our lawyer to be okay to fund with CFIP. So there you have it. CFIP can be used for work within 100 feet of a house, but it can't be used to fulfill, requirements of ITHP or Forest Practice Act requirements. Good thing. There you go. Well, should we end it on that happy note?
I suggest we do.
Oh, Matt's going to have an exchange here with Jeff. Is that for all CFIP projects going forward? So forward or backward. I guess if the lawyers say it's okay. Okay. Now we're getting more questions. And as soon as you bring up CFIP and defensible space, you get a lot of questions. So what do you think, Jeff? Is that for all CFIP projects going forward? Excuse me. Dennis is saying CFIP will not allow biomass projects. I don't think that's correct. Jeff is very lawyer-centric these days. He says if our lawyers say so, then it's going to be for all CFIP projects going forward. As long as we're on CFIP, I don't think that Dennis is right by saying that CFIP will not allow biomass projects. I think you can do that, can't you?
I don't think
right?
there's a category limit on CFIP projects, but Jeff can correct me.
No. Well,
No,
historically, there used to be a squabble about. I remember on the North Coast where CFIP projects were being used to generate hardwoods that were being sawn into boards, and so there was a question as to whether a commercial product coming off of the CFIP could come off of the CFIP project. And strictly speaking, biomass can be a commercial product, so maybe there is an issue there. So I don't know the answer to that. If Jeff wants to respond in the chat box, that would be great.
He may have gone to lunch. We can put that on our question and answer website too. I don't know the answer offhand either.
Okay. Well, I want to thank everybody for being here, especially you guys that have opportunity costs of your time, and you took the time to be with us. I want to thank Chuck, Helgi, Tadashi, and Tom for being part of this so far. And I guess we're going to call it. Well, Jeff is saying any positive funds must be reduced from the payment. But the problem is that the project must be under some kind of a commercial permit. So, yeah, there you have it. So before I choke to death, I'm going to sign off. And Mike, we're going to close the meeting. Thanks again. And,
Yep.
and
Thanks,
we'll
everybody.
see you on the 24th.